I'm John Batchelor. Little politics here. Roundtable with my professionals, John Avlon of CNN and the Daily Beast, Major Garrett of the National Journal, Jon Huntsman. You mentioned Jon Huntsman, Mr. Avlon, the former governor of Utah, Republican, named by the president as our representative to China, served effectively, left in a brilliant fashion by walking around in Beijing the day of the Jasmine Revolution note against the Beijing bullies, made a wonderful speech about freedom in China, is now back and looking at the presidency. But nobody back east knows about him. Is that an advantage?
I think it could be. Look, Jon Huntsman could be a very attractive candidate for the Republican Party in the general election. The problem is his path to winning the nomination. The more candidates that drop out, the more dissatisfaction there is, the more there is an obvious opening. Right now, the center-right is essentially a vacuum in the Republican Party. Now, granted, there's been a lot of rhino hunting, so not a lot of center-right folks left that want to run for president. Jon Huntsman evidently does. I think he's evidently got more fire in the belly, certainly, than Mitch Daniels, but there's less of a draft movement. The fact that Jon Huntsman just received the former South Carolina Governor Carol Campbell's son's endorsement, if he gets in the game, who was the campaign co-chair for Mike Huckabee last time, seems to me significant. I think Jon Huntsman, if he got in, would be a formidable candidate, and I think certainly the most formidable general election candidate, the candidate President Obama would least like to run against. And if he were to run, I think it would actually change the whole tone and tenor of the debate, because he wouldn't have the ability to effectively go harshly negative against President Obama. Instead, he would be de facto forced to say, we have principal disagreements, let's have a principled philosophic debate, and that would give many centrist, moderates, and Main Street voters permission to vote for him.
Major, how does Jon Huntsman look to Washington, to Capitol Hill?
I would say largely as a mystery. They don't know him very well. And I must admit, John, I've had to reframe my sense of the Huntsman potential, largely because I assumed, as I think most people did, that Haley Barbour would run, that Mike Huckabee would probably run, that Mitch Daniels was likely to run, that even Mike Pence might run, and John Thune might run. A lot of Republicans who have opted out, Mitch Daniels is the only exception on that list, and because there would be so many obvious, clear-cut Republicans in the race, someone like Jon Huntsman, who had been tapped by President Obama to work within his administration, would always carry the mark of Obama in the primaries and caucuses, if you will. And I'm not trying to be overly literary there, or just...
but it worked.
But it worked.
Yeah.
But that's not the case as much anymore as I once assumed. And if I'm Jon Huntsman and I'm looking at this race strategically, what I tell people who are skeptical about me because I work for the president is, well, one of the reasons he tapped me, and you don't have to listen to me, just listen to the president and David Plouffe, his campaign manager, is because they were afraid of me. And they wanted me to work for them so you wouldn't like me. So why don't we skip that part, folks, because you don't like Obama, and you know you don't like Obama, and you may like me. If I'm Jon Huntsman, that's what I take to every town hall meeting I do in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. And I'd say that Jon Huntsman now, because of all the other Republicans who have dropped out, can be thought of as competitive in Iowa, potentially competitive in New Hampshire, and with a structural toehold in South Carolina. That's not a bad place to be if you're Jon Huntsman right now.
We're going to have a chance to talk about all the major presidential contenders, those still in and those who've departed. However, I right now want to turn to issues, policy, because there's something going on in 26 New York, I'm told, to flag. This is snow country, upstate New York. It's Chris Lee's district, which he abandoned through what you'd have to say is strange and rascally behavior. And the contest now is between two very bright, attractive young women, Republican and Democrat. And within these last days, something major has happened because both speakers have gone in to support. Nancy Pelosi raising money in New York, the Upper West Side, all of the major powers of New York. Chuck Schumer going into the district to campaign at diners with the candidate, and John Boehner going into the district to campaign with the Republican candidate. So, Major, I want to start with you and then have a chance for John Avlon to respond. I'm told that this is Metascare versus balance the budget versus debt ceiling versus tax hike. It's complicated by a third-party candidate who's ornery enough not to be classifiable. He was a Democrat. He claims he's a Republican. He's now running on Tea Party, and that weakens the polling. So is this a by-election that Washington is watching, Major? I'll start there.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say you can summarize it this way. Is it 2008 or 2010? That's what this is about. Now, Democrats are playing in this race because they want to bleed Republicans. They want Republicans institutionally to spend money, which they are. Outside groups who are affiliated with Republicans are spending money on television. The NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, is spending money in there. And Democrats, even if they lose this race, will say, we bled Republicans. We forced them to defend a seat that used to be occupied by Jack Kemp and Tom Reynolds after that. This should be a safe Republican seat. Look how in what bad shape they're in. Look how they've bled with independents. They had to spend all this money, put all these resources in. And Democrats are also saying, look, we have a chance. We're within range. And if we take this race, it will have a devastating psychological effect on rank-and-file Republicans. I'm not exactly sure that's true, but if Republicans were to lose this race, they would find themselves psychologically in a much more damaged position.
Mr. Avlon.
No question. There's a Republican advantage, I believe around 30,000 registered votes in this district, but they're running scared. It is unfortunately partly a mark of the success of Metascare. It is also a mark of the accelerated cycle of overreach and backlash that we are in politically. Right now, the Democrat has an argument to make. It's going to be relatively high turnout for a special. The third-party candidate, Jack Davis, confuses things enormously, especially because he's just got the support of David Bolivia, who's a former Army officer who has been campaigning for the conservative and Constitution lines. So this is fractured. Republicans should be paying a lot of attention and a little nervous.
John Avlon of CNN The Daily Beast, Major Garrett of the National Journal, 26 New York. The special election is on May 24th. That's next Tuesday. There will be a high turnout. Chuck Schumer cares. Nancy Pelosi cares. John Boehner cares. I care. I'm John Batchelor.